In the most highly anticipated Week 1 college football playoff rankings for the American in conference history, the biggest question, where would the AP poll number 2 undefeated Cincinnati Bearcats fall? As always, there were plenty of opinions from media and the fans of where exactly the Bearcats would land, but the only opinions who matter, those of the 13-member committee putting the Bearcats at number 6 in the first rankings of the season. And speaking of opinions, we know someone who has plenty of those on all of this. I now have the pleasure to welcome ESPN analyst Mike Golic Jr. into the American studios. Mike, you released your top 4 ahead of the show on Twitter. You had Cincinnati there at number 3. What was your reaction when you saw them come up at number 6?
It's stunned that they were that low. I think the combination of seeing Cincinnati down at 6 and seeing Oregon jump up at 4, we had seen in the days prior a lot of people wondering, all right, how much would the committee love up on an Ohio State team that a lot of people had seen growth from since that Oregon loss early in the season? What were they going to do with Alabama? But I think seeing Cincinnati all the way down at 6 at this point in the rankings, especially when you had gone through the first half of the season, you had the new 2 non-conference Power 5 road games that you had won, including a win on the road at now number 10 ranked, according to the CFP committee, Notre Dame. So I was stunned that at this point where we're taking the snapshot, they weren't rewarded for doing a lot of the things that they'd been asked to do, that the group of 5 had been asked to do in the past.
You mentioned Oregon. Let's take a closer look. I mean, they lost to a 3-5 Stanford team. They do have the win over Ohio State, and the Buckeyes came in there at number 5, both ahead of Cincinnati. What message did the committee send by putting those 2 teams ahead of the Bearcats?
Well, I think it's a reminder that there's also this message of context that's always going to come up in these circumstances here. And with Oregon, that was always going to be a huge part of the conversation. How much did the committee sympathize with the fact that Joe Moorhead, their offensive coordinator, was unable to be a part of that Stanford game, one that ended on a pretty controversial pass interference call? For Ohio State, it was about growth, what they had shown since that loss there. But as much as anything, I really think this was a reminder of 2 things. One, how much the eye test matters, and certainly what have you done for me lately in the eye test, an area that had hurt Cincinnati in this with the way that Navy and Tulane had recently gone. And then the other was just the way that they view the strength of schedule in conference for the Power 5s as opposed to in the group of 5 here. You can look around and see there wasn't another American Conference team ranked in the top 25 here. And we've seen plenty of that in the past. We've seen SMU and Houston get the nod in the past. We've seen multiple teams in group of 5 conferences ranked. And so I think that was a clear message of how they view the group of 5 at this point in the 2021 season.
SMU and Houston, they're both in the AP poll right now. We know that there's no link necessarily between the 2, but you look at a 3-loss Mississippi State team, a 3-loss Wisconsin team, both of which are not in the AP poll, but in these CFP rankings. How much could that really impact Cincinnati down the stretch, knowing they still have the Mustangs to play and could potentially face Houston in the American Championship game?
Yeah, it's going to be critical. They're going to need a lot of help, is the message that got sent to Cincinnati. And listen, in the most chaotic college football season in recent memory, with more top 25 upsets than we've seen in almost any year in the sport's history, is it possible? Absolutely. And Cincinnati has got a schedule laid out. Their percentage chance to win out by almost every metric is very high relative to their competition. But with SMU getting knocked out by Houston, something that was going to be big, I thought, for Cincinnati down the stretch of the season, they're going to need a lot of help from a team like, Georgia beating Alabama in the SEC championship, Oklahoma losing again, Oregon dropping another one here. Unfortunately, the Bearcats don't control their own destiny at this point, and a large portion of that is because the lack of ranked opponents now left on their remaining schedule.
Committee Chair Gary Barta mentioned last night that they do have the win over Notre Dame, an 11-point victory there on the road, but he said that that was the only win that they had. What did you really make of that when he made that statement?
It's again the way they look at the group of 5 and look at the American Conference this year and this season. listen, it's not Cincinnati's fault that Indiana chose this year to bottom out after a 2020 season that was really special for that outfit. You can only do so much in scheduling. They tried to put the teams on their schedule. So part of that's bad luck, and a part of it is the reminder that until we get college football playoff expansion, the margin for error for the group of five, while we're only choosing 4 teams, is going to be razor thin. And that is unfortunate, but it's the situation that everybody knows right now. So I think that's going to be interesting to see now how this Cincinnati team responds this week. You've got game day coming into town. You've got Tulsa rolling in here, a Tulsa team that played Ohio State very close, plays up to their competition in the first half of that game. Can the Bearcats send a message, despite this initial setback in the rankings, that we understand what we've still got to do to accomplish the goals we want to this season and respond accordingly?
All eyes will be on the Bearcats this weekend with game day rolling into Nippert Stadium, and you will be there on the call. What do you expect to see from the Bearcats against Tulsa, knowing that these rankings came out not necessarily in their favor?
I expect to see attitude and energy. And that was really something that was missing from the beginning of the Tulane game here. And you can kind of understand when you look at everything that went into that one. It's the week before the rankings. You just came off playing triple option Navy. That's a tough task for anyone. People talk about the option hangover all the time. You're rolling out. It's an 11 Central kick. It's a half full stadium down there in New Orleans. And it's a 1-6 Tulane team. Now it's a different story. Now, all right, you've got added fuel to the fire because you probably feel disrespected by the committee. You've got college game day in town. You've got all the eyes in the world on you. And what you talked about, all that support that Cincinnati is getting from a lot of fans, from a lot of people in the media that are tired of just seeing the same teams atop the playoff. And so I think you're going to see a much faster start from Cincinnati. I think you're going to see this team understand that they've got to put their foot down on the gas and not let up during the course of the rest of this schedule.
A large discussion that's been going on for some time now, and commissioners will be meeting on this today, is the need for playoff expansion. Certainly here at the American, we feel that way. We have that bias. Why does what happened last night further the need for a 12-team playoff?
Well, it's a reminder that, and I've always said this, I don't know if playoff expansion has ever been about crowning a different champion, right? We see it's hard to compete with the resources of Georgia and Ohio State and of Clemson at the top level. But what we don't want is people excluded from the conversation. And I think there's a growing sense that as we get towards the end of the season, you get teams and get games that all of a sudden feel like they've got less juice, because now playoff chances feel less likely for some of the teams outside of the top 6 or 8 groups here. And even more than that, I think this velvet rope around the college football playoff, there's a huge recruiting advantage that comes with the eyeballs and being a part of this conversation with these big stages. And so I think the thought process is maybe if you expand that pool a little bit, make allowances for, like we said, the top 6 ranked conference champions, which would allow for the group of 5 to have a much easier path into all of this, then you can eventually see the trickle down of, all right, eyeballs and dollars from TV means more money that can go to the resources in these programs, more exposure for talented players to see, hey, I've got a path to this level, to this platform, to this college football playoff at a school like Cincinnati, at a school like UCF, at a school like SMU. And now all of a sudden, maybe you spread out some more of those high quality recruits. And now all of a sudden the tide rises here. And now all of a sudden we can see this happen on a more consistent basis, because that trickle down effect of allowing more people in ends up spreading some more of those resources around.
An undefeated UCF wouldn't have been left out there in 2017. We saw them take care of business in Auburn in the Peach Bowl. But Mike, one last one for you before I let you go. If you were in the room making these decisions, part of the committee, what is your argument to have Cincinnati where you did yesterday at number 3?
I think my argument would be, again, this is about a ranking for right now. This is not what I think is going to happen for the rest of the season. Because we see head-to-head mattered a lot to this committee. The eye test mattered a lot to this committee. The strength of your conference mattered a lot. And I think over the course of a long season, those are valid arguments that could have kept Cincinnati out when we got to the end of the year. But when we look at right now, I can say, all right, they went on the road and played 2 Power 5 teams and beat them. No team in the SEC is going to play 2 road non-conference games against the Power 5. Only one team in the Big Ten is going to do that. And I think scheduling aggressively is something that, as a college football fan, I've always wanted. And as a committee, we've seen incentivized in the past. And I think for all those reasons, having that marquee win against Notre Dame and having no losses in that column would earn you that right and earn you that benefit at this point in time here as we took this first snapshot.
Mike, thank you so much for your time today, and really looking forward to hearing you on the call this Saturday, a big one with game day rolling into town, Cincinnati and Tulsa. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.